If you've worked in corporate your whole life and think that you're not a creative, congratulations, you're wrong. This is about how creativity is absolutely essential and you're creating every day, whether you realize it or not. So let's get into this episode of How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace. Hi, everyone. My name is Beverly. I am a COO and your corporate empowerment officer. This is How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace. And before we jump into the episode, let's hear a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is powered by Beverlytics, the operational empowerment firm that transforms mission-driven nonprofits and startups from overwhelmed to optimized. From systems to strategy, Beverlytics empowers your organization and builds the backbone of your next breakthrough. And Foxsy Media, the art education platform where creators create. With on-demand courses in lettering, watercolor, journaling, and more, they give creative vision the structure and spark it needs to thrive, and creators the infrastructure they need to grow. I am so excited for this episode because if you have been keeping up with me, you may have noticed that I have recently announced my partnership with the Foxsy team. Now, what does that actually mean? For me, I have always tried to work diligently to fit creation into every aspect of what I do, even if my day job didn't necessarily reflect a more artistic pursuit. And as professionals, a lot of us may feel that pull to kind of let those things that feed our passions go. And as I was making that announcement video that dropped last week, I realized wow, I've really been creating or investing time in my passions my whole career. But when we are growing, we don't always see it that way, or maybe you haven't had that opportunity to invest in what that means for yourself. So I am so excited to have my very first ever guest on How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace, because we all should give a damn about showcasing our passions, investing in them, but most importantly, building an environment both in the corporate sector, but also in our professional lives to empower each other to show up as our best selves. And being creative is a through line when you think about being your best self, whether you realize it or not. Because some of you are killing it at karaoke nights, and some of you love going to a play. So I know that there are plenty of folks who are just itching for that opportunity, and we're going to talk about what those look like today with my guests. So I am so excited to welcome my creator partners, the Foxsy team, Shelby Abrahamsen and Jon Abrahamsen. I feel like this is like a huge reveal because, as I said in my video, I've been like breadcrumbing this on TikTok live and also in personal spaces and professional spaces, like my creative team, my creative team, my creative team. In fact, I actually did another interview today and someone said, am I going to meet this like creative team? I'm like, you are today. They've been a part of my story in a way that quite literally feels serendipitous. But before we go into that, I just want to welcome both of you for being on How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace. How are you?
We're good.
Hi, thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Good
How are
to
you
be on
feeling?
your podcast. A couple months ago, could you even imagine having a podcast?
You know what, though? Probably, but not like this. Most certainly not to this scale. And I think because I am a certified yapper, if you've worked with me, you know that. And also, I think it's about, though, the intention, right? Mm-hmm. It's like what I was so excited about is we had been starting to talk about what partnership could look like is intentionality. Anyone can spin up a podcast, right? Or anybody can spin up like content, right? But how are you actually making impact? And like, that's really what the Foxsy brand is all about, is education through abundance, through innovation and empowerment. I'm excited to kind of deep dive into how folks who feel like creativity is out of reach to them, or maybe are looking for an avenue to be able to discover what creativity means for them as they continue to grow. Because as we've all seen, the hiring market is crazy, the corporate environment is getting crazier, and everyone needs an outlet that is healthy and abundant. So
no, I'm all about that.
Oh, yes. And so why don't you both talk to us about your journey, not only from the lens of how Foxsy came to be for our audience who are excited to learn more, but also like to your point about mission, like what is that mission and how does that apply to what Foxsy's doing now?
Well, starting with just like a quick background on how we came to be, we began in the online content creation game 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. It was a completely different landscape. A lot has changed in the last 10 years, but we began as a blog. I was very front of house. He was very back of house. And we started blogging about bullet journaling, if you're familiar with that. The thing about the bullet journal that was so amazing for me personally and how it connected with so many people was I felt like I was sort of a stifled creative. Like I had gone, it was very creative, arty kid. And then when I went to college and started my adult life, I kind of kicked it to the curb because it didn't feel like there was time. It didn't feel responsible. It didn't feel like there was a good enough reason to do it because it wasn't going to make me money. So I just knew that for a fact.
Gotta eat.
And it just felt frivolous or childish. I had these notions that it was somehow bad. And so I was very stifled, and that led to a lot of pent-up anger problems. I felt frustrated. I felt like I was not able to grow the way that I needed to grow. And the bullet journal was like my loophole because it was productive. I was like getting my shit together. I was planning and staying on top of things. But I started making my bullet journal creative. I started adding little bits of color, a little bit of fancy lettering here, a little bit of that. And before long, I was full-blown watercolor painting in my bullet journal. And it reintroduced me and recontextualized art as something that I wouldn't have been able to maintain my bullet journal if I hadn't done all of those things. Because if it's too boring, I'm not interested. I don't care. But once it started to become an outlet and it became somewhere that was fun to be, so leading that into, we were reaching out and working with a lot of people who suffered a lot of the same problems, stifling feeling or that guilt of not being able to just access their creativity.
And it's funny because at that point, like I was kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum of her. She had come from was a creative kid, creative in high school, did art, was good at art, all of that. And I didn't consider myself artistic at all. And when we actually first started the first site, I was in law school, which is about the most logical place you can possibly be. And before that, I worked in politics, and something
One of
that
the most
was
illogical places you could possibly be.
But what kind of happened to me is she was really who changed me, because I was always head down, logic, you work hard, you go to school, you get the highest level of education. Like I was first generation college, so it was like, okay, you got to go as far as you can. The problem was when I was in those rooms, when I was in those classrooms, and especially in politics, when I went to the networking events and stuff, and I'm sure it's a lot of the same in corporate, I just couldn't help but like, this is so boring. There's no color, there's no anything. It's just boring. Like, what's the point of doing all this if it's just going to be boring? And especially being with her, she is quite literally a stop and smell the roses type of person.
Yes, can also vouch.
Takes me like twice as long to get anywhere.
Yeah. And honestly, I started to love that because I'm someone who lives in my head. And so like having someone to kind of pull me out really helped me kind of see the value in your environment and all of that. And especially once we started getting traction and we started having more readers and more students and started receiving emails talking about how we were changing people's lives. That was an incredibly powerful thing to hear. And at some point, it just kind of became a, like, for both of us, like, what are we doing? Why are we trying to do these careers that neither of us really want to pursue when there's something right there calling us and saying, do this, and getting the validation and getting all of that. And it was really kind of a pivotal time for us when we started to really realize that not only was creativity valuable, and not only were we providing something valuable, but we were just getting started.
Then when COVID hit, we had to make some hard pivots, as everyone did. One of the things that we did was gather up all of our digital products that we had at the time, so workbooks, classes, and we bundled it all up and put it out there as pay what you can, just as a way of putting some good in the world when we were all struggling. And in doing so, first of all, our community supported us and provided for us in a way that we never thought quite possible. But two, we realized that it was beneficial approaching it this way. And from that sort of initial bundle of things, we worked our way to the concept of Foxsy, which was this online art education platform where everything is under the umbrella of a membership, essentially. So you can pay a membership and then just get access to tons of resources and high quality education classes. And that's what Foxsy became. We launched with 8 classes in December of 21. And with an extraordinarily successful launch, we realized we needed to throw everything into this because this is clearly meeting a need that some people really needed. There was this vacancy where people just could not feel like they were allowed to, or that they might be capable of being creative.
And one feedback that we started to get a lot and we started to realize is that students love learning from creator. And I think that's because the traditional academic environment can be incredibly intimidating.
And expensive.
And exclusionary in a lot of ways. But what you find with creators a lot is that oftentimes they've self-taught themselves to a point. And ultimately what I think a lot of people end up doing is sharing the resources they wish they had had when they were going through whatever they were going through. And when you start to blend that with learning, I feel like you get a really powerful balance between objective knowledge and subjective experiences that can create a powerful connection and really drive the learning process home in a way that makes it stick and makes it approachable and makes it feel like it's okay to, you know, quote unquote fail, or it's okay to be bad. You got to be bad before you're good. Have fun with it. And like, we're here to support you.
Put the fun back into it. The struggle that most people were facing was it was all in their head. They have all of these preconceived notions about what art is, what it isn't, what talent is. Spoiler alert. Around here,
We believe in skills.
we believe in applied
which can be
skill.
developed.
Yep, it's all a learnable skill. It's just you have to be willing to be bad before you're good. And we try to create a safe space at Foxsy where people are allowed to be bad.
And celebrating that bad art is, I think, in today's day, more important than ever, because it's so easy to go online on social media and see these amazing creations. And it's so easy to start thinking, like, why even try? I can't compete with that.
They think that people are born, they shoot out of the womb, pencil in hand, and are amazing from the beginning.
And some people have natural attributes that enable their skill development to accelerate. But like you said, if you continue to push, continue to skill up, you can still achieve a lot of things on the artistic side.
And something that I think is worth remembering is that kids learn things faster. So people who, like me, started drawing as a very young person, because I've been drawing since as long as I can hold a crayon. I put in a lot of my hours, a lot of my XP when I didn't have a job. I didn't have nothing to do. I was a kid. I was able to just be passionate, be curious, and just do it. Adults have less plastic brains, so it takes a little bit longer to learn things. Adults have responsibilities. They have bills to pay. They have jobs. They have reputations or a self-idea that they feel they must maintain. And sometimes they think artist or creative cannot fit and coincide with the existing thing. But it's worth remembering that learning something is just curiosity and consistency put together. You just have to want to do it and then consistently push towards it.
Is more important to actively engage and embrace that side of who you are rather than creating an amazing piece of art or amazing piece of music. That's not the point, because
the end result is not the point, it's the process.
Well, and I think it's interesting as I'm watching you both kind of chat so passionately about the genesis of returning people back to the freedom that comes with investing in your passion, because that's really, to me, what I hear is just like giving yourself permission to fail, giving yourself permission to be exploratory without necessarily the end result being Picasso. It's just the process of being able to choose yourself through art or creativity. As I'm listening to you both, I envision that there might be several people or maybe many people listening who are like, okay, wait, where did Beverly come in all of this? Or where did creators, where does artists and like, cool, but you know, how does Foxsy's model play into not only empowering creators, but the future of the creator economy?
Yeah, one of the things that I've always said for a long time is that every problem in human history has required a creative. And I think that's really the crux of where we see this in terms of working with creators, because there's often this misconception that creativity is only traditional art form.
Painting, music, poetry.
But it's not. Coding is a creative practice. A basketball player honing their skills is a creative practice. All of that is a creative practice. And the more you give yourself that flexibility, the more you give yourself room to create and really innovate, what you're doing is you're adding another dimension to the skills that you already have. And one of the things I love about you as a creator, and one of the things that made me really want to work with you, is that you are approaching a topic that has really been static for a long time. And you're approaching it from a new angle. And you're approaching it with space for not just
Personality.
creativity, but emotion, fear. And I think that's so important. And that's what we look for when working with creators, because we know how to operate in the creator economy. And we know how to facilitate people sharing ideas that can break through. Like, I think you're a perfect example of how much space there is in fields and subjects that we traditionally view as very logic based. There's a lot more space in there for creativity and critical thought to a certain extent.
And expression.
And then I think we as a society really give and embrace.
Yes.
Also,
Yeah.
we started working together because it, like you said, it was very serendipitous because we have this, we built our own business, but neither of us have held a 9-to-5 job at all. We did this so
Ever.
young. So we're feral when it comes to the ways of the workplace. Beverly, on the other hand, comes in with this operational knowledge of how all of these things work, how they fit together. But you also have the creative background. So you're able to see what we're trying to do and see through a creator's lens, which has been a perfect blend that allows us to put our heads together. We help you with certain things and you help us with certain things. And it's just been, I mean, and that's how creators ought to be, right? It's what we really want to see in the world is a lot more collaboration
Yes.
of ideas, intersectionality between different things.
I think that kind of, like, to me, leads to one of the more practical aspects of Foxsy. As we've gone through all of this, and I think something a lot of creators run into in any space is, and I'm sure people even in traditional jobs run into this, at a certain point, you grow to a level of success that all of the tasks that are required to continue growing and maintain that success start to pull away from the thing you were originally passionate about, the thing that really got you going. And so with Foxsy, what we saw was an opportunity to create institutional support for creators so that they can focus on creating and not focusing on running a business and all of that. And also give them a fighting chance to break through against, you know, big corporations and all of these different entities that seek to kind of
They like it's hard to break through. It's hard to find your little corner of the internet, and
It's hard. It doesn't feel accessible to a lot of
it's easier than you think.
There's a
but there are
scrambling.
challenges.
There's definitely a huge scramble right now where, you know, you have the beginning of the bell curve where, you know, especially during the pandemics, we have to see these rise of influencers, these rise of creators who are lifestyle creators. Like that was the big thing is, you know, the day of my lives or personality creators where you're following these folks because you just like their vibe. And as the market has shifted, as the world has shifted, you know, I was recently at an event where we were kind of learning about the future of the creator economy and that, you know, by the end of, I think 2032, it's going to be a like over $300+ billion industry by itself and growing and accelerating fast. And, you know, the next era are niche creators actually, because you have this expansion of people who are like, oh, well, it seems easy enough. Let me just post videos talking about my life and then eventually people will like me enough. And to your point about the corner, right? It's like, well, now if everyone's doing that thing, what's that next innovation? And what's so exciting about what Foxsy does is it's taking creators who have multi-hyphenate passions that they feel abundant with the ability to teach others and also empower others through their work and helping, like you said, build the infrastructure. Because as an operator, it's like infrastructure is what enables anybody, whether you're a business by yourself or a business with 500,000 people. That is what is going to enable you to scale. And so I love that you both are kind of speaking to not only the aspect of, you know, how do you differentiate yourself in a market that already feels saturated but is still growing very rapidly, but also how do you make space for that if you have responsibilities, if you have life, if you have kids or things I'm doing for my work, whatever it is. You know, I'm not thinking about logging online and doing an art course maybe or becoming a content creator myself, even though I might see that and be inspired and go, oh, it'd be so cool if I made this video or if I did this thing.
And a lot of people do that and think like, oh, maybe one day.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe one day I'll finally pick up a pencil and learn how to draw. Maybe one day I'll figure out how to make silly videos on the
Exactly.
internet. You could start learning it right now. And that's the thing, because the time is going to pass one way
Right.
or another. But the sooner you start gaining XP, and the sooner you'll be leveling up.
This is kind of a good example of what happens when we don't allow enough creative space. It gets people undervaluing the value of their own expression. Everyone's experiences are valuable because you can reach your people. You can
Yes.
be yourself. And with the algorithms and just the platforms that we have, if you show up consistently, you'll get in front of people who will learn from your perspective. It can make it hard to look at your post and be like, oh, I've got 100 likes with 15
Right.
comments. What am I even doing? But those are real people.
How do I get out of 300 view jail, 300 views? It's like, that's 300 people who
Right,
watched
like,
your
yeah.
stuff.
If
you
you
know?
put 300
Imagine-
people in a room,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
and you tried, like, if you tried speaking in front of 300 people in a room,
Yep.
I bet it'd feel very different.
And
Yeah.
so I think in a lot of ways, we talk a lot about creativity, but I almost feel like that focuses too much on my
the end
point. Is
goal.
that
Yeah.
yeah, that's better
Is
said.
seemingly the end goal, but
Yeah.
creativity is the process.
Yeah.
Because that's something I've always firmly believed, is that focusing on moving forward is so much more important than focusing on what you're building to. Obviously, you have to have goals in mind, but you have to embrace the process of getting better. You have to be willing to be bad and realize that every time you get a bad piece of art, bad piece of content, a bad review at work, those are all opportunities to learn. You get to put one of those bad behind you, because we all have bad moments. We all have bad creations. We all have bad everything. And every time you do something and you get that bad outcome, you're getting it out of your system and learning the ways to improve the next time. And if you do that enough, the results will absolutely blow your mind.
What I'm excited about to get to after the break too is entrepreneurs who are now in this process of rapid growth. What does cultivating the workplace look like for you now proactively? Because we rarely see entrepreneurs talking about what the environment will look like as they create it for their teams, for their staff, and for their creators in this context. So I'm excited for after the break to be like, how are y'all going to give a damn about your workplace as you start to grow it, going from a 2-3 person team to growing to, I mean, where you guys are looking for the next year and a half. It's about to be really expansive. We will get to that after the break.
A personal thank you to my community investors. Your belief in me and direct support of this podcast and my content means more than words. You didn't just invest in a show or a video. You invested in me, and I'll never forget that or your support. Learn how you can be a community investor by heading to my Amazon content creator wishlist at the link in the description or at the link in bio. Please. Thank you for your investment. Let's get back to the show.
Okay, we are back with How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace here with Foxsy as we talk about embracing creativity as a part of your workflow and as new entrepreneurs. And by new, I mean, they've been around a minute. Like they said previously in the first half, been doing this for over 10 years. But now in this new era of Foxsy since 2021, they're growing and growing fast. So Jon, I want to ask you, you talked with me before about these visions that you have for the staff experience as you grow. And what I get so excited about in talking to growing entrepreneurs who don't necessarily have the full team yet, this is the time to build that empathy forward operational framework that I'm so passionate about with my team at Beverly and just where we're going to be growing to, because the future of business is also empathy forward. You've talked a lot about your goals for the employee experience. So maybe highlight for the listeners, like, what does that look like for you now as you think about your staff in the future?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I actually feel like right now, as we're kind of starting this growth trajectory, it's more important to focus on that big picture of how we want to structure the company moving forward. Because if you wait too long to put those systems in place, they're going to get whittled away over time. So for us, there's a couple of things that I think we really prioritize. We prioritize freedom for our team. So something we offer is unlimited paid time off and flexible work hours. And that's generally because we feel like anyone we're working with is adults that we trust. And as long as they're hitting their deadline, that flexibility to be able to go to your kid's game without having to worry about X, Y, and Z, or even just going and having lunch or whatever, or just having a day where you're like, you know what? I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't have any pressing deadlines. I know I can take the rest of the day off and still get everything I do. Go, do you. Because like, at least in my experience, when you try to really control people, like not assign them tasks, like
Micromanage.
when you try to micromanage and you try to tell them what they can and cannot do,
When you're allowed to go to the
right,
bathroom.
you're
Yeah,
doing,
right.
you're doing so much to like clip their wings, and not only that, you're incentivizing all of the things that companies always talk about, time theft and all that. So really what we strive to do is we are very mission focused, and we want a team that cares about what they're doing. And that's because I believe that if you have a team that cares about what you're doing and you respect them as human beings, that your company in a lot of ways can become almost invincible.
Yes.
Because if you give people jobs they don't want to lose, they'll fight for it. To me, that's more important than standardizing everything. And obviously there's a blend. You have to have some level of standardization, but you can't ignore the people in the process,
Right.
because then you're wasting your biggest resource.
You can't standardize people.
Yeah.
Right.
You can standardize processes and workflows, but people are that it does. We don't want everyone to conform. That's kind of against our whole thing.
Well, right.
Like you don't want everyone to fit into a neat little box. We want everyone to be funky little weird dudes.
Well, and
you
I
know?
think that's the thing about the whole discussion about work from home versus being, in office versus the hybrid to being an entrepreneur myself and now a content creator and all of the other things is, if people feel happy at work, they'll want to collaborate at the office, which I feel like is such a simple statement for what feels like has been a kind of exacerbated complex issue. But it really, to me, I've told so many leaders over my career, if people feel appreciated, like you said, if they feel appreciated, if they're being paid decently, if they feel like they have that flexibility to be humans, because what we're talking about is humanism.
Yeah.
And especially if you are also being considerate of like something as simple as like travel stipends. Like I remember for a company that I worked for, we were switching offices and several people were like, oh, like, well, since it's further away than what we typically anticipated, like, well, there'll be travel allotments. And like, those are the types of things that if you're thinking about those proactively, like, yes, make the business decisions that you need to. And I think there's this weird, at least in my experience, perception that like folks won't understand business needs. It's like people understand that businesses will do what businesses will do, but it's an excuse to remove the human element from it in the guise of, well, we had to make a business decision.
Because
It's like
like under the current structure, humans are inconvenient.
Right,
But like
right.
that's the
We're
strength
messy.
of it. Like
Right.
because I also think if you facilitate an environment that encourages not just creative expression, but also encourages opinion and encourages different thought, you open up so much opportunity for innovation at the ground level, because like the decision maker is the decision maker. The decision maker does not have to come up with all the ideas. And in my experience, like the people on the ground, the team members are probably going to be better positioned to be like, why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense. And
That's what everyone that we know who's worked in a major corporation, like relatives, friends, I swear to you, I hear them all complaining that management made them do this, is trying to implement this thing, but that's clearly not the most efficient thing because, and then they list off a bunch of super specialized knowledge that I can't follow. But it's,
We're going to shake some people up listening to this about that because it is, and it's a massive pain point.
Yeah.
It's true. I cannot tell you how many times in my career where, like I even have said, there was one time where I was given a project when I was working in tech and I was working amongst really incredible engineers to lead the project as the product manager. And the first meeting we had, I said, hey, I'm not going to tell y'all how to do your job. And their eyes all kind of went, and I was like, I'm not an engineer. So I'm going to tell you what our stakeholders want to get accomplished, roughly when they wanted to get accomplished by, and you're going to tell me infrastructurally what you all need from me to make sure that it can get done or if it's tangible. And it's coming from respect. It's like respecting that knowledge, expertise. I think there's a lot of leaders who, as they continue to grow, and why creativity and investing in it is so important, is you kind of can, like, you grow and you cultivate skills, but are you dynamic? Like, are you continuing to expound upon what folks who are on the ground level or learning new stuff, the newest innovations are you staying fresh in that way, or are you kind of staying in tried and true? And that also is pretty pervasive in a lot of business spaces, is you've got somebody who's been working at the company for 20 plus years, who has been sitting in that seat or similar seats and thinks they kind of like know all of the things. And then when somebody with innovative ideas comes forward, it's a threat. It's like, oh no, this is how we've always done things, and this is how we're going to do things, versus actually this is more efficient, more time effective, everybody's happier, all of those things. But it's a threat, because if it's an exposure almost in a way for leaders who have not been creative or innovative.
Well, one thing that I kind of feel, and this is my perspective, I don't know for sure, like I said, never had a 9 to 5, is it almost feels like there's like one of the main ways that creativity, and really in the business context what matters, innovation, is stifled, is this desire for control over the workforce, over the processes, over all of that. And I can understand that to an extent. Like, corporations, for all the problems, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot that works there.
Right.
And so kind of using the work from home thing is one of the things that has always bothered me about that argument, is why there's
About what argument?
about like the argument of, should people come back? Should they not? How does it affect the workplace? Some people may genuinely be better always working from home. You don't need everyone to come in the office. You don't need everyone to have the same level of buy-in. If someone is doing their job and they're doing it well, and they're doing it in a way that better serves their life, what more do you want as a company?
Well,
if you're
I
getting
think-
the output.
I think though, like there's a fear I want to make sure I address too, is, if you have, some people who are always working remotely, and then you have some people who are coming in office, and then you have some people who are hybrid. I have heard and been told to, and I've also seen in my own experiences, when the collaboration's happening, there's a synergy that happens when you are in person that is very different from when you are virtual. And if you have some people who are virtual and you have some people who are in person, now you're trying to figure out the systems to make sure that they can hear everybody, and they're unmuting and muting to make sure that they can be heard. And then you're also trying, something might be really cooking here. And there's been times where I've been in meetings where you're really, really, really cooking up, and then you forget that you've been on mute the whole time, and now that person hasn't heard the ideation. So I think also from an infrastructural standpoint, going back to your point, companies have not built the infrastructure that could empower that concept of individualism, or individual, work, what works for you, to even make sense, because we still haven't found that sweet spot.
I have had that experience with D&D.
Oh, sure.
Trying to do a half virtual,
Right.
half in-person game
Yep.
with, it's a nightmare to
It's
try to
tough.
keep people in the loop what's going on.
And see,
Yeah.
I think what this comes back to for me is, this isn't, in my mind, a problem of work from home versus not. This is a problem of adequate expectation setting by a company, and leaving space for the way the person works best, because there can be a middle ground. This is where hybrids come in. Maybe all those meetings are put on 1 or 2 days,
Right.
so that you can have the other 3 days, and that's the expectation. There's so much gray area here that's not explored.
Creative solutions.
And that's really what I'm talking about. Is I'm not going to sit here and tell anyone how to run their company. Never mind big organizations I've never been a part of. What I am going to say is, your employees have the answers. Talk to them. Leave space for their own autonomy, and give them space to help you build your company. It's just going to make a stronger company. It's going to create better buy-in. It's going to create just more mutual respect. And it's going to, I think in my mind, it's also going to create more respect for the process, because the process was developed intentionally with the company in mind, rather than just trying to apply a solution that some other company has been successful. Like, one of the things is, like, I think when, especially with what I'm talking about, it can be really easy to kind of hear me as saying, like, it's a failure of managers or team leaders. But that's kind of where my belief stems from, is that actually we need to empower those people more to make solutions with their team. Give them the outcomes you're looking to seek, but empower the people who have those relationships to build solutions that work for your team and your company. Because I don't know how to do it for every company, or really any company.
There is no
Right.
one size fits all.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, like, in your experience working in these companies, do you feel like the people on the ground were empowered, especially like the lower level managers? Did they have the most connection with the people on the front lines? Were they given any space to innovate or operate with their teams?
No. Not always. I think it depends. Like it's one of those things where culturally, right? If your business is, no matter what industry you're in, the reason I have a pretty like at least initial no is because there's, and I did a video on this recently about what buy-in actually is, like what alignment actually is, like what things are when like we need to all be aligned, and it's actually really not alignment. It's you need to get on the boat or get off the boat. The decision's already been made. And so when these kind of buzzy words are used under the guise or perception of collaboration, that also I think is what creates a lot of trauma for folks in the corporate space, because a lot of leaders have gotten very good, and people, I'd say, like people in general have gotten very good at making you feel like you're being bought into or that you're being invested in. And then when you really look around, you're like, wow, I haven't worked on the projects that I said, I was told I would be working on when I was first interviewed, or wow, like I was told that I'd be professionally developed. And actually I've been the one who's been really pushing for my promotions or pushing for my whatever the case. And there's nuances with everything. But I think the reason in my experience why employees aren't always empowered is because leaders aren't always empowered, and then their leaders aren't always empowered. And I always say I'm an equal opportunity empowerment creator, and that like leaders, especially as somebody who's been on the leadership side and the employee side, if you don't feel like your ideas are being received by your senior leader and they're not feeling like it just creates this really unfortunate trickle down that then makes people, whether they realize it or not, very resentful, because you wonder, what are you actually working towards? What are we actually doing if I can't innovate as a leader on what makes sense for my team because I know my team best, and my team can't innovate because I'm having to execute on something that I don't think. It kind of goes from there. And so I think what happens is that there's this hodgepodge of employees feeling disgruntled because they're not actually iterating or innovating on the things that they want to because of whatever business need, but also not giving space, like you said, not given space to have a backlog where, okay, we're not going to get to it now, but we're going to get to it later. And then on the leadership side, oh gosh, there's so many leaders that I have worked with, that I'm privileged to have worked with across my career, who they're just brilliant minds that are crushed by objectives that are built so many levels beyond them, or even just one level beyond them as board, their C-suite, and the board is determining what their goals should be. And they, going back to conformity, will then mold their leadership, because you learn how to play the corporate game. You're going to mold what your focuses are based off of what that next person wants to see from you, which then pulls you further away and what maybe initially excited you about leading at that particular company. And I'll say that, recently I did a keynote and I had a leader ask me, what do I do if my team and my direct leader are solid? Like, we are innovating together, we're collaborating. I give them that flexibility, I give them that empowerment, but like everywhere else in the company isn't doing that. That also happens too, where you have these silos. So in my experience, working from, healthcare to retail ops to tech to nonprofit to higher ed to everywhere in between, there's some places that have silos. It's not broke, so nobody's trying to, mess with it. But then everywhere else is dysfunctional. You have companies where, and I think the reason I say like a softer no holistically is because I have felt like in my career, I've been the leader to consistently say, why aren't we listening to our teams? Our teams are saying they're unhappy, or they're not being invested in, or they're not working on the projects they want to. The leaders are unhappy. They don't feel like they're being invested in. They don't feel like there's consistency or structure, SOPs, policies. And depending on the senior leader, C-suite, or board you get, that the answer you're going to get in response is going to vary between, that's cute, like love that, but also it's a business and like we'll find somebody to replace you, or absolutely, let's figure out what we can do to change it so everyone feels good. And I'm very fortunate that over the latter part of my leadership experience, I've had the privilege of working with leaders who fall a little bit more here, which is like, well, let's see what we can, because at the end of the day, you have to run the damn business. And I've also met a lot of people who are more so like, we can find somebody to replace you tomorrow. And people are feeling that when they're being told that they're hitting record profits and then laid off the next week. Or when they're being told, we're going to invest, we have mission values, these core things, these buzzwords, right? Or when they're saying we're going to professionally develop you and it's a 2% raise. Like, the people are feeling that there's a disingenuine behavior.
It sounds like there's a fixed mindset somewhere in the pipe that's causing a kink, because it's not allowing adaptability.
It's a bottleneck. Yeah.
It's a bottleneck of limited thinking, a lack of
creativity. Yes.
Because if you ever had a teacher that wanted you to show your work, like you're doing math wanted you to show your work, and then you showed the work and you got to the right place, but they're like, they take points off because you didn't do it exactly their way. It's like, there are times where things need to be followed to a T, you know? There's absolutely times and instances where that's the case. But I feel like a business is more, it's an organic being. It needs to be able to move. It needs to be able to adapt. If an animal can't adapt to its environment, it dies.
I think that's what we're seeing on the corporate side, though, is that these old systems for hiring, the systems for promotions, the systems for the pizza parties in lieu of actual valuation of your team, that it's all collapsing. And there's a lot of studies that are coming out that C-suite leaders are saying that they're leaving companies because of a lack of support. And in that collapse, what will be born is, I think, organizations like you all who are empowering professionals, creators, employees, people to be those experts, to fail forward without having to look behind their shoulder as to whether or not they're going to keep their job, and be invested in holistically as humans beyond what the business model says they should invest in.
Yeah, in fact, that's why we are very set on trying to put the markers in place and the boundaries in place
The
on our company
foundation. We want to build that foundation so that
Before they come in.
because otherwise you can't go back and easily replace a
Well,
foundation.
and I think it's so easy, especially as you move higher up that ladder, to keep the people on the ground real, to stop from abstracting them. And so I think you have to put systems in place from the ground level when you're starting that nurtures that connection between the top and the bottom. And I think a lot of these old organizations have almost like received the insidious side of productivity in this drive forward of efficiency and more
Drones.
productivity.
They want drones. A lot of times these companies want drones, not human beings that have needs. They want people who come in, do the job, and then leave.
Well, to be fair, people were okay with that at some point.
My dad worked in aircraft for his entire career. And when he was in aircraft, it was different. The companies cared about their employees. Getting the gold watch meant something. Spending your career with a single
Pensions, 401ks, like,
company, all of it meant something.
Yeah.
There was buy-in by the company, the employees. And somewhere along the way, I think that got lost. I believe in treating people like humans because they're humans and they're good. But even coming at it from a purely logical standpoint, it is clear that there is a hiring crisis developing in this country.
It's developed. It's here.
Yeah. And at a certain point, I think building your company in a way that doesn't leave space for your employees is going to make it completely impossible for you to compete for talent in the next 10 years.
1,000%.
So it's not even just a matter of like being nice to your employees or anything like this. I think it's a business decision at this point that you have to change.
Like you shouldn't have to necessarily justify it with numbers because treating people like people is obviously the right call. But yeah, if you treat your employees well, they'll want to stay.
They'll work harder. And the numbers actually is what I want to segue into. Is we think about the numbers, as there's folks of all aspects of business or otherwise listening to this podcast. The creator economy, multi-billion-dollar industry already continuing to accelerate in growth. So how does Foxsy play into tapping into scaling within that business model, getting to carve, like you said, carve out their own little kind of piece of the pie in an accelerated fashion so that as Foxsy continues to grow, you can continue to be those folks who are like, hey, we did it with creative solutions, with creators, with innovation, and we're crushing it. Because I think there's a lot of naysayers who think that, oh yeah, this is like, whether it's a fad or anything else, whatever it is, money's dad is dead. Like the industry's already talking back. So what does that mean for you and the Foxsy team?
Saying structure is bad.
We need structure.
Yeah.
Like I said, a lot of corporations, they've grown and accomplished amazing things because of that structure. So the way we view creators is creators are more of like a raw resource. You're not trying to control their output, you're trying to harness their output. But then once that output's created, our production system and our post-production system is highly organized. It's highly step by step. It's structured. It's the exact opposite of that side of the house. And I think that's where those flexible solutions really come in handy and really can leverage the most power, is that like you can have an unstructured side of your business and a structured side of your business. Those things can coexist. They can serve each other.
If you leave the unstructured, that on purpose, leave room for it. You know, a rage room where you make a big mess, letting them
Be raw, be creators.
I'm picturing a room full of monkeys with typewriters, but you know.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but truly, I think to your point, so say I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, you know, Foxsy's empowering creators. Cool that right now they're artists forward. They brought on Beverly. How do people get access to tapping into that permission that you're talking about? How do they get access to, because I have people who have interacted with me at different events as they've kind of heard all of the new things I've got going on. And they sometimes speak to me as if it's like really out of reach for them. They're like, wow, what you're doing is so, and I'm like, well, yes, the way I'm doing it is unique to me because no one is like me. However, I am the first person to say, well, I want to introduce you to them. They're great. Or you should think about creation yourself. Or have you always thought about pursuing a venture? And I think about times where I've taken my friends or staff to karaoke nights. And if you're watching this, like, thank you for allowing me to take you to karaoke nights. Because to me, like after a hard day of work, I'm always the first person to say karaoke for two big reasons. And I most of the time do not communicate these reasons to them. The first is that obviously it's a bar, it's lively because there's music, there's energy. But the second reason that I take people to karaoke is because we do not allow ourselves the freedom to express beyond talking to each other. I've been doing this for over 10 years, taking people to karaoke for happy hours. I was at a conference in Dallas and these senior level, VPs, C-suite, everybody was looking for something to do after the like main event. And I said, we should all do karaoke. I mean, big players in the financial services industry. They're like, that's actually really great. And we piled into 4 Uber XLs and then zipped over to karaoke. And I mean, I saw these, people over the age of 60 all the way to entry level, connecting through music, connecting through performance, connecting through people laughing when they're leaving, where maybe they were stressed out about that project that night of what that looked like. Creation heals. It heals us. And I think in corporate, we need healing right now. And that has been kind of my sneaky thing of like, let's do karaoke. And so people be like, okay, but they're the main ones who are up there singing a song and like allowing that release from the tension of being in those confined and controlled spaces.
A lot of it is reframing what the goal is.
Yeah.
If a lot of people get, like, as they're starting to kind of take their first tentative steps into art, think that they need to make art.
Right.
They need to make art that they can sell.
Yep.
Do well on Instagram.
They do well on
Right,
Instagram.
right.
You need to remember that the art you're making is for you. The creation, and maybe you'll make a nice result that you want to share, that you're proud of and you want to share, but that's not the point. It's not about the product that you get at the end. It's not about the finished piece. It is about every step along the way, because making art or expressing yourself is you're connecting with the spirit. I don't want to get all like wooey or anything, but like, there's your physical body, there's your mind, there's mental health, there's physical health, but there's also spiritual health. There's something, some X factor, because we know it when we feel that it's not there, when it's missing or when it's feeling unfulfilled. It starts to become stagnant and bitter inside. And that's where I mean, all the people I know of who are like kind of like art bullies, people who are like,
Like
see
this is
them.
art and this is not.
Yeah, the people who are like, well, my kid could make that, or I could make that if you gave me a paintbrush. And I always just want to say, like, yes, please.
If you, Shelby, like could talk directly to my audience or a professional who's listening to this, who feels like that maybe they have, they spent the last 20 years, 10 years, however long, moving far away from their art, moving away from creativity, moving away from, what is one thing that you would tell that professional who feels like creativity isn't accessible to them, or that inner self is a bit lost because they've been making other people's businesses scale or other people's dream scale, and how do they refine that dream within themselves?
And that's tough. I mean, that is genuinely hard, because it's like the older you get, the more scar tissue kind of covers that because your inner artist, shall we say, the inner creative is a child, is a kid. Every kid ever, every human being ever who was a child was an artist without fear. They weren't afraid of what people would think. They weren't afraid of making it bad. They were playing. It's play. It's curiosity. And it can be really difficult to re-access that as an adult, especially like the longer you've been away from it, the more weird it feels trying to get back into it. But trying to reframe art as not a product, but as an activity. Trying to reframe, you know, it doesn't need to make money. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to
Doesn't need to
justify
make
it.
money.
Right.
What?
You don't
How
need to
un-American.
justify.
Everything we must do must have the end result to drive sales.
And while I know that coming from a business about art, one thing that we really try to tell our students, the people who come in, is like, you don't need to justify learning art or chasing some particular passion or skill. You don't need to justify it with, well, once I'm good at it, then I'll make money or something. You can literally just learn it because you wanna.
Yeah.
That's it. You can paint because it's fun. You can use charcoals and chalk pastels because it is interesting. You can get into embroidery because, you know, that seems kind of neat.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't need to be anything more deep than that. It can really just be play. This just seems like a fun game.
Professionals can play because we know they play already, sometimes in your face, but other times they play because, you know, when we think about those networking events and other things, like, play is happening. It's really directing, instead of maybe choosing to go to the bar that night or go to wherever. It's like, do that art class you've been thinking about. Make that content that you're seeing me make, other creators make, you know, pivoting, reframing, like maybe this week I actually do this, or as a company, invest in that for your team. Have art and paint nights, have creative nights.
Well,
yeah.
I was gonna say, and like, I think a trap a lot of people fall into, especially when they feel like they can't approach it, or they feel like they've tried and they failed in the past. And you had this problem early on when we started working together. This idea that everything has to be planned, that there's a right way to do things.
He says to the operator.
Right? But like,
It's true. It's true.
None of that matters. Just start the process and start it. Just start and see where it takes you. That's kind of the whole point.
Chase the fun. Chasing the fun.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I think, you know, continuing to put myself on, we call it a growth case study instead of blasting, but it's the truth. A great example of this, you know, for those who might be like, okay, but how do I just start then? Because we hear this a lot too on like TikTok and other places. They're like, just start posting. And, you know, one woman she was crying and she was like, I hate seeing people create and people doing this. And I want to, and I have these ideas and I go to press post and I can't, and I want to. And if you're thinking that to yourself, when I wrote my book, Create the Door, I had written it in January. I was in the editing process. And around that time, I met Jon and Shelby. We were not at all talking about the thing. In fact, nobody knew I was writing about the thing. And casually, Jon kind of asked, he was like, oh, like, what are you working on creatively? Things like that. And I said, oh, you know, I just finished this book. Then run it. And Jon was like, you what? And I said, yeah, I wrote this one. And he's like, so when's it going out? And I said, oh, well, from what I've read, I need to have a full-scale marketing strategy. I need to start partnering with such and such. I mean, I had this very robust roadmap, and then it says I really can't scope getting it out until such and such. And then I also need to do that. And he goes, do you have a cover? And I said, yes. My sister designed it. He goes, is the book done? Yeah. He's like, release it. And I looked at him like he had 4 eyeballs. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, release it. And I said, oh, I can't I don't have a platform yet because I hadn't really started posting on TikTok yet. So my thought process, which may be for other folks, like, well, I don't have, where is it going to go? No one's going to buy it. Who's going to, like, all of those things. I have to create this plan because then the plan will have to have marketing and all this stuff. And he said, when is your next public engagement? And I said, I have a panel that I'm doing for Women's History Month. And he goes, you're announcing it at the panel. And I looked at him and I was like, no, I'm not. That's so funny. I'm not doing that. But he's like, you're announcing it at the panel. He planted that seed at like mid-February and it's getting closer and closer to the panel. And I'm like, he's like, so you're announcing it, right? You have the ebook ready to go. You have a link for it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's really serious. So accountability and creativity. If you are somebody who has found creativity as a integral part of your life and you are embedding that, whether you realize it or not. Like, I've met amazing folks. One person she's amazing. She's a baker, but also is an amazing customer success person. I've met a person who's incredible at HR who also is really talented at botany. Another good friend who is an amazing writer, but she's also an engineer. There are people who are doing that. Hold your folks accountable when they drop little gems like I did. And the night before the thing, he's like, so is your link ready to go? Are we good? Didn't have it ready. The night comes and we get done with the end of the panel. I was surprised at myself because I am typically very confident. I felt my hand because it was about to close and they said, any final thoughts? And I was like, oh my gosh. And the thought I gave myself before I spoke was, are you going to betray yourself by not letting the world know that you created this thing that you think really can help people? Because now is your time. And I said, I was told that if I don't make this announcement that I would probably regret it. So I'm going to let everybody know that by midnight tonight, my book that I wrote that is going to be released by the end of the month on Amazon is going to be dropped tonight, exclusive here. So you can get the ebook. And now looking at that versus a couple weeks ago, seeing my very first royalty check from KDP is like, it's wild. And so that I appreciate that because I wouldn't, frankly, to your original question earlier, probably would not be here doing the podcast, doing all these other things had I not taken that first step of just releasing the creative thing that came to me, which I believe is from God. And truly, it was like flowing through me. And then it was sitting there. And like now it's truly healing and helping people. I would not probably have gone the routes I've gone now. So you don't know what doors you could create by investing in your own journey.
One of the very first things, one of the number one problems that I hear from students is the first page fear. They're opening a brand new journal, brand new sketchbook. It's all beautifully clean. It's perfect. The moment you put a mark in it, you are marring it forever. And people feel like there's this enormous anxiety and pressure in like getting it right, like because it matters so much. So it feels. I used to feel this too. One of the first things that I have my students do is, screw up a page and do a swatch page for your different pens, or if you're using paints or inks or whatever. Swatch page, easy, functional, and it does the job of marking up the page. First page can be a quick, write down your goal. What do you want to achieve out of this sketchbook or journal? It could also be literally opening up to a random page and scribbling on it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's literally just taking a step, because once you get over that threshold, it gets a lot easier.
And just take it from me, like I am now producing things. I'm gonna have this poor team. Like I told them, I said, you don't know what you've done, because now it's like I'm launching my first. Well, by the time this airs, it would have just launched my first ever class. I'm like, all of these things are coming out of me because it's true. Like once you take that I was shaky-handed 2 or 3 months ago, and now I'm like, what if we try this? What if we try this? Because now the spirit of space is open and it's abundant and it's flowing, and I'm connecting with people and you're connecting with people. It does matter. I know Jon was going to share.
Well, I was going to say, the power lies in the creation. That's where it comes out. And
not in the product.
Not in the product.
creation.
Products will come. That's part of it. But it's not the start. And so echoing what she talked about with the blank page fear is there's a lot of power if you're really struggling to create something. And this can be writing. This could be a proposition for your boss. This could be any number of things. Create it with the intent to destroy it, because that eliminates the end.
Write that email and then be prepared to delete.
And you might decide, oh, actually, I don't want to delete this. Or you might decide, I'm going to destroy this and then I'm going to redo it. Because once you do it that first time, it becomes so much easier, because you start to realize how much lighter you feel when you give space for that stuff, and
and how it's not big of a deal the thing is, because individually it might feel like a big deal right now, but in the grand scope of your life, this book is obviously going to be mark the beginning of a chapter, but it's not because of the content of the book. It's because of the act of releasing it. It's because of the act of creating it. Because if you're creating regularly, stuff is going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to produce some things that maybe are, but you'll learn from them. Even your things that are not failures but aren't successes, you'll learn from it. You'll learn from it all. Just keep doing it.
Well, just do the thing, and things will happen.
As we close, I want to zero in on 2 big things. Give us a little teaser of the I know, but I want y'all to hear it. What Foxsy's future is looking like for the remainder of the year. Both there's some really good stuff cooking, things that we can't say, things we can. But I want to just ask you, what are the most exciting things you're thinking about as Foxsy continues on through the remainder of 2025? And then the second question, because we love a compound question. I used to get this feedback a lot. Stop asking people compound questions, but I want it to be juicy. How does not only my work, but the creators that are currently a part and will be a part of the Foxsy ecosystem play into that vision?
For me, I'm so excited to be able to facilitate more and more content and opinions and perspectives out in the world, because as we grow, especially through the rest of this year, we're really starting to be able to use the systems that we've developed over the last 10 years to really facilitate that creation and move it forward. And for me, the more unique perspectives, the more unique talents and skills that we can get out in the world, the more people we can reach, the better it's going to be for everyone. Because I genuinely believe the world is a better place because your creativity is in it. And being able to facilitate that across every discipline that we can, every field that we can, and show that there's space everywhere for your creativity and your creation, I think is what I'm most excited about. Because especially like working with you, it really did kind of solidify the belief that creativity is not just art. It's part of being
Never has
human.
been.
Art is just the most obvious example of it, but it's in everything.
Art is life.
Art is life.
That's an Easter egg. When I was going to school at the University of Dayton, there is a video of me on the University of Dayton YouTube where I'm talking about my work as a theater performer. Art is what kicks off that video.
We are just at the right age that we were young, goofy little folk, right as the internet was like, hey, let's share everything. And it's there forever now.
For us, we want to amplify those voices that show that there can be unique approaches to old problems. And the more that we show that, we hope that that can start to influence people to really see the value in their own perspectives and their own solutions, and empower them to start making changes in other organizations, in other walks of life. Because like for all we've talked about, there are a lot of companies, a lot bigger than us, that are doing this. This works. Like creators are such a powerful tool for messaging, for teaching.
Yeah.
And we want to do everything we can to facilitate that change and really breathe new life into how we view creativity in our society and the value that it gives.
The world is changing rapidly, and it's going to change with or without us. We'd like to have a say in it. And you can have a say by engaging with your creativity, by looking for solutions, by being a part of it and not just accepting what's happening. You're actively working towards something better. You can have a voice in how things change. You don't have to be a backseat driver. You can actually have a hand on the steering wheel and influence not just your immediate circle, your immediate world. You can influence a lot bigger than you think you can. An individual person can do way more than they ever give themselves credit for.
And I think that, gosh, that's such a powerful like end button, because it goes back to what you said at the beginning, Jon, about it's changing lives, it's healing lives. This work is healing lives. Every day I get DMs or messages or comments from community members, because I personally don't call my community followers, because we are all learning from each other. But my community members who will say, Beverly, because of your tips, after months of being unemployed, I finally got a job. Or one person commented and said, Beverly, because of your tips, I got the highest paid job, the highest title I've ever had in my entire life. Where the creation is healing people. It is creating space for people that otherwise felt inaccessible to them. And I'm so deeply grateful to both of you for empowering me, because that's ultimately what it's a creation also is about. It's about empowering others through your art, and whatever your art is has the ability to heal, which is why I love that you talked about, Shelby, of coming into yourself, what's in here, what's deep in here, because I think everything we have, we need is in here within us. You don't know who you can impact by showcasing your unique self and your creations to others because of the lack of the end result, right? It's not about the end result. It's about these little videos, right, that people are doing on TikTok who are coming from that place of help and coming from that place of creation. How many stories have we heard of folks of music, right? Of artists saying that folks have come to them and said that their albums have prevented them from ending their lives, that they have listened to music that has inspired them to become artists themselves. You have no clue who you, as a professional listening to this, who feels like creativity isn't accessible to them. It is not only accessible to you, it is in you now. And I implore you to use my case study, Shelby's case study, other creators that Foxsy is partnering with and will continue to, that is not only accessible, it's happening now. And make sure your voice is a part of the grander conversation as to what happens for society, because a lot of old infrastructures are collapsing. And this is the best time, the fertile ground from those collapses, to build something new together.
It's like a forest fire. Down, saplings rise.
Well, and-
Yes.
Yeah, because it's our world. We get to mold it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the world is better with your creativity in it, your perspective
Yes.
in it.
The world is better because you're in it.
It's ours. Let's build it into something we want.
Yes. Okay. So y'all can see why I'm like, I was jazzed in my video, right? Like these, and this is, I want to say, like, you know, as we close, you know, Jon and Shelby, like truly, I feel so blessed that I met you that at a time where
Yeah.
Same.
because I not only from the creation of being able to help others, but just feeling more empowered within myself, like that. There's so much transformation that happens when you allow yourself the freedom to create. And what you are doing, what Foxsy is doing, what they are prepared to do, you're going to want to, if you don't already follow them on LinkedIn, follow them everywhere on all of the socials, you're going to want to
Things are
stay in
about to
tune
get
because things
crazy.
are getting swassy in here. And I am just so grateful to have incredible partners in my own creative journey and also supporting Foxsy as they scale operations. Cause yeah, I appreciate you saying that we need to make space for ops because, you know, instructs policy, I always say SOPs aren't sexy until you need them.
Yep.
It's important.
Policy isn't sexy, your structure isn't sexy until you realize you need it.
We were feral for many years, and we were like, we don't need that. We're above the corporate
And then they needed
game.
it, and that's okay because
And then,
Desperately.
and then we grew up a little.
yeah, and that's the beauty of it, right? Is the symbiosis of abundance, and I hope for that for you. So if you're a professional listening and had listened to this episode, and you're like, okay, maybe I can. Absolutely. Not only can you should, because it's waiting for you and your audience is waiting for you. The people who you can heal are waiting for you to share your unique experience. And it's groups like Foxsy. There's no one quite like Foxsy, but there's groups like Foxsy who are starting to do the work of creating the infrastructure so that creators can do what they do best, which is create. And that's ultimately the goal with Foxsy is getting creators back to creating so that they can focus on helping their communities and also building generational wealth for themselves so that they aren't thinking about where that meal is coming from.
Get some stability in here.
Stability, right? If any of that resonates with you, which I envision it was resonating a little bit because you wouldn't have made it to the end of the episode, then make sure you are following Foxsy everywhere. They are cruising and it is just the beginning, not only for them, but for the creator economy and for creation in general as society shapes into what it is going to shape into because it's reshaping as we speak right now. It's molding and changing right now. So thank you so much to Jon and Shelby and the Foxsy team and everybody who has tuned in to this episode of How to Give a Damn About Your Workplace. My name is Beverly. Let's give a little bit more of a damn, not only just today, but for the rest of our days as we think about our roles as professionals. And let's give a damn about creativity as well. So thank you for tuning in and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.